Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Gestalt IT Rundown. We are live here in the wonderful Gestalt IT offices in Hudson, Ohio, and we're going to be talking about the enterprise IT news of the week. My name is Rich Stroffolino. You can find me on Twitter at Mystery Anthropology. I'm the editor here at Gestalt IT, in case you haven't joined us before. But we have a very special event today for the Rundown. Ordinarily, I'm joined across cyberspace by my good friend and coworker, Tom Hollingsworth. But today, I think we have a very special surprise. Oh, hey, it's Tom. He's in the office. This is really cool. Tom, thanks for being here.
Rich, thanks for having me in this office.
Now, you came just for the rundown, correct?
Yes, exactly. There's no other reason for me to be in Ohio other than to do this.
Exactly. It's really the only reason Ohio exists. I'm in for merging it into other states if it wasn't for this. So I'm happy you're here because I enjoy having a state of my own. Today, we're going to be talking about kind of the big event going on this week. I know there's a lot of companies at it right now. Is AWS invent, all lowercase. It annoys the crap out of me that they don't capitalize it normally. Is it like, did they start it as an email chain? Like Jeff Bezos said, I want to do the invent conference. Someone replied to it,
I
and
believe
it
all
said
of the
it said reinvent, and that's how it got started.
either that or all of the capital letters are in a single US East instance and they may have been
Oh,
lost.
there we go. Well, we know for a long time they weren't encrypted, if nothing else. So Tom, I guess you've been following the show a little bit. I'm assuming
Mhm.
you're in the industry, as I like to say. Uh, what have been your impressions so far? Any big announcements that have caught your eye?
Well, it's funny that there's a lot of announcements that are coming out because, well, it's reInvent and they save up a lot of stuff, but there's not really anything big. There's no snowmobile this year. It's a lot of, as Rich and I were talking about earlier, it's a lot of ticking boxes. It's like, oh, hey, we do bare metal now, or hey, we're offering availability here, or we're offering monitoring tools. It's what you would expect from a mature, responsible company. A whole bunch of boring announcements that allow you to manage things more effectively.
It's the Microsoft effect of AWS.
Yeah, exactly. They seem to be that they're targeting some very specific types of customers now. I guess they feel like that the first mover advantage is theirs, and they just have to kind of mop things up so that they're trying to keep people from getting into more customers. They're trying to differentiate themselves from Azure. They're trying to prove that Google doesn't exist, I guess.
I mean, Google's doing a pretty good case of that themselves. Although they just had a big announcement, or relatively big, that they're cutting all their fees for managed Kubernetes
Yeah,
clusters, which is pretty huge.
it makes sense when you think about what Kubernetes. You basically think Google, and so a lot of people I know that Kelsey Hightower has a great series on Kubernetes the hard way, and it's stand this up on Google. It'll cost you about $17 to learn this, and now it's free. So if you haven't had a chance to check out Kelsey Hightower's Kubernetes the hard way series, you should go do that. But probably after reInvent, unless you're actually at the show and you're currently sitting in line for a session you wanted to get into, now's the perfect time to do that.
Yeah, it is surprise. I mean, I guess the one thing I was surprised I didn't see at the show is any news about like maybe some managed Kubernetes, or at least some container orchestration news. I mean, pretty much you can roll your own, which is great. You can run someone else's managed Kubernetes, like Platform 9 or something like that. You really don't have a native AWS though version of that.
Well, I think they're not really wanting to highlight things like that. You know, one of the big announcements was bare metal,
Yeah.
AWS. I think that they're trying to avoid kind of putting themselves into a very specific niche, like, hey, we are the best at Kubernetes, or hey, we're the best at virtualizing Oracle databases. They want to be like a utility company, and so they don't necessarily want to make their messaging feel like it's kind of trampling on the other competitors.
Yeah, the bare metal announcement's really interesting because I think we covered on Gestalt IT. I think it's Ravello
Mm-hmm.
is basically offering the same, a very similar kind of feature set on Oracle's cloud, and I thought that at the time that was a really interesting, big differentiator. If you need bare metal performance on a public cloud, I'll be interested to see what the uptake is on AWS's side.
Yeah, they're going to get the remaining 4% of customers that they didn't already have. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping that by ticking a lot of these boxes, that it kind of makes people feel a little bit more comfortable about things like cloud computing. But I don't necessarily see them doubling their usage numbers by this time next year, because let's face it, if people are going to go to cloud, they're either already there or they have a provider in mind.
The one big theme that I kind of pulled from reinvent this year. Obviously, last year was just insane road warrior, Mad Max semi trucks full of sands of storage.
Yeah.
Which I think I calculated at the time is like faster than any commercial broadband that you like. If you calculate the speed on the sneaker net of the snowmobile is like
Yeah.
still insanely fast for the amount of storage. Anyway, I think it's machine learning. I think is
Yeah.
really what AWS is really Amazon really wants the next frontier of AWS to be. They launched before the show. They launched the I'm looking at my notes here. The ML Partners. I'm sorry, the ML Solutions Lab, which basically is really interesting. It's you essentially you're a small startup. You want to get into machine learning. You don't really have the experts on hand. They'll do training for you. They'll even send people on site. I mean, obviously it's a service, you're paying for it, but basically you don't have to have that specialty in-house. They'll either train you or send someone. And what's cool is they'll do follow-ups and that kind of stuff. So I think that's more of a people solution to machine learning. But they also launched a partner solution where they're going to be highlighting people that are using cool machine learning applications running on there. They're doing some other interesting even the bare metal stuff. I could see having some applications on that level. That to me is like the biggest theme of the show so far. And I mean, obviously it makes perfect sense. You need a lot of compute resources and people aren't going to have that on site. You need to scale that up very quickly. If they have some specialized services with that, that also goes along with some of their high performance GPU compute as well.
Right. And when you look at the way that AWS is building out, they're absolutely trying to be the compute and GPU utility, because machine learning takes an insane amount of CPU. But more importantly, like you pointed out, I believe that Eli Manning is going to retire from the NFL and go be an ML programmer because it pays better. The bounties that are getting paid for ML programmers now are, well, they're like it used to be back, if you remember, before the crunch of 2001 when the internet completely imploded on itself. Remember when we used to get ridiculous salaries for having no talent? Now we're back into that bubble again, only now it's, instead of being I know how to build a website, it's I know how to build a machine learning algorithm. But you can't, if you're trying to develop that kind of expertise in-house, you can't do that right now without farming it out to somebody. And with Amazon, they're like, well, if we're getting paid for the CPU cycles, we might as well double dip and get paid for the experience on how to run them.
Well, the other thing that I'm seeing a lot of announcements on, this isn't necessarily Amazon direct, but a lot of partners coming out. We've seen announcements from Stratascale, from SolarWinds, from a couple other companies out there that management is kind of the next, obviously it's no secret that cloud management, especially when you're dealing with hybrid multi-cloud, is either a disaster or terrible or not where it needs to be. And we're seeing a lot of solutions coming out based on that, being like, hey, this will keep you sane. You can figure out what's being stored where, what it's costing you in different locations. How can you, what you should maybe bring back in-house, what you should farm out, those kind of solutions as well. That's kind of like the subtext to all modern clouds. It's not just endemic to AWS, but that management is, we're hitting scale now where management is becoming a primary problem.
Yeah, and when it was shadow IT with people in a credit card and running one AWS instance for 2 weeks to get a report billing cycle done, it wasn't really that big of a deal. But now that you literally can scale everything infinitely quickly as long as you don't hit your credit limit, you really have to know what you're doing. It used to be in enterprise IT, if you're doing, what are we calling it now? It's not private cloud, it's hybrid cloud.
It's hybrid multi on-premises cloud. I think that's what it's called.
Okay, the old boxes that you have collecting dust in your data center, back when that was all you had a pretty hard limit as to how far you could scale stuff. And now with Amazon, where it takes 2 clicks and suddenly you've spun up 14 new instances, and they're, nobody ever buys the small instances. It's like, well, I need to do a calculator run, so I need the quad core 18 gigs of RAM, 4 terabyte elastic storage thing to keep my calculations. You don't want to be the person that has to explain that to the CFO at the end of the week as to why your simple calculation took $6,000 worth of AWS compute power.
I do have to wonder, though, is it going to come to a point where it's going to become a little bit of like the Twitter solution to everything, where Twitter was this wide open platform, AWS is this wide open platform. People create these very interesting services to run on top of it. And then at some point, is AWS going to say, like, Stratascale or SolarWinds or whoever, you have this really great monitoring stack. We want that. And now every other monitoring stack is out of business.
That's exactly what's going to happen. For those of you who are not in the know, the Apple the Cupertino Fruit and Computer Company does the same thing, and there's a term for it, Sherlocking. When they created the Spotlight search tool, it basically put Sherlock out of business. That's your business model if you are a company, is find the most popular thing that you don't make that people think has to be purchased to make your stuff work, buy them, and you get their revenue too.
It's a vicious, horrible cycle. The last kind of item that I saw coming out of AWS, it's a huge show. I think we're going to probably see a trail of announcements throughout the week and maybe into next week of just stuff we missed. But one really interesting one I saw was that Aqua Security is now offering a very interesting thing. It's a per container, basically security scan, and what that's going to do is not only look for uh, malware, but just kind of just general issues. I do think that's an interesting space. Maybe not for AWS, but for the container landscape in general. Is that going to be the next frontier where we're seeing um, more of a focus on security versus simply portability?
Yeah, the security market for containers has been really slow in coming. I mean, the very first time I really ever heard about it was when my friend Dimitris Stolatis at now at Appareto talking to me about his Trireme product. But then, it kind of fell off the radar. People were more concerned about management and monitoring and things like that. And now that they're monitoring things and realizing, oh, these can get malware too, it's now becoming a bigger deal. And so you're going to start to see, I think maybe in the next 6 months, that's where the gold rush is going to be. Let's build security into containers and make sure things work the way they should and nobody's doing something they're not supposed to. But it's got to be useful. We're not running AV scans on individual containers. It's got to be smart security.
And then the last item, the last like official Amazon one that I thought was really interesting was they have a new product or service called GuardDuty, which is, we were just kind of talking about this, of people kind of hijacking private keys that accidentally get posted on the internet and then using it to mine $8,000 with, or racking up an AWS bill for $8,000 to mine Bitcoin for 10 seconds or something like that in an extremely high instance. Basically, what this would do with the service, it would monitor your AWS account, look for weird behavior, or which is valuable in and of itself. But where I think it really comes in handy is misconfiguration, specifically using, and this kind of feeds into their machine learning. They're using machine learning algorithms to look for common misconfiguration issues and letting you know, like, hey, maybe you don't want this to happen every time you get a ping or something, like. I think that is where the value of that is, while the rare instance of saving you that $8,000 bill for your private key being leaked is also important.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to be getting that security notification that said, "Hey, National Security Agency, you just made your tools bucket world readable. Is this something you really intended?" Yeah, it's the stupidity checks, because let's face it, no matter how good you are, you will still do dumb things if you're not thinking.
I think that's the lesson of the day. We're going to probably get out on that. This has been the Gestalt IT Rundown. We're here every Wednesday. We started a little late today, but ordinarily 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. You can tune in 12:30 Pacific, but we won't be here. And you can check us out if you want more kind of coverage like this. We have news coverage all the time on our website, gestaltit.com. Find us on Twitter at GestaltIT, Facebook.com/GestaltIT. If you want to follow me, I'm at Mr. Anthropology. And this guy over here, Tom Hollingsworth, is at Networking Nerd on Twitter as well. Lots of good networking advice and snark, I'm told.
A little bit.
Okay. All right. So until next week, here's wishing everyone out there a super sparkly day.